do they just not even care about the truth anymore? That the mainstream
Well, I
media
think
is just completely.
that's certainly part of it. I think we're looking at, there's certainly this ideology. We've become a much more highly ideological society, or at least our ruling elite is. We used to have people who were much more practical and firmly grounded in reality and charge, and now we have these increasingly unhinged, ideologues, these neocons. So that's certainly part of it. But I think it's also a question of economics. It's just like in the old days, if you wanted to get international news, you really depended on these sources. So a newspaper like the New York Times could actually afford, and made economic sense for them to have a dozen, highly trained journalists in the Soviet Union, because they were one of the few information gathering organizations, and people were willing to pay for them to do their job. But now, all these newspapers and also major TV networks have been undercut by the internet. And, how do we get our information? I get it from Telegram channels and from Twitter and from a myriad of sources, but very little, it's some from the mainstream news sources. But I just find there's less value in that. There's just ways there's no need to pay for a subscription to the New York Times or the Financial Times or anything. You can get your information, through other sources. And so they just, they could not justify maintaining these large staffs of foreign news correspondents.
Yeah, well, if they told the truth, then I think it would be popular. I mean, from
Well, it would
an
help.
economic point of view.
Yeah. No,
I mean, look at
right.
Tucker Carlson was by far the most popular person on news, and he was fired because it wasn't an economic decision. It was an ideologue decision.
That's very, very true. That's very true.
So I think the economics are actually in favor of telling the truth, because people want the truth. It resonates when the truth is told. I mean, that's why these people are going to alternative sources, dissident news sources. We're just a very small channel, but just like we're a little example. The reason that we're able to slowly build a little bit of a following is because we're not just spouting propaganda from Ukraine. We're actually trying to ask real questions and understand it objectively. And if the New York Times did that, if CNN did that, I guarantee you the ratings will go up and they'll start making more money. So it's completely, in my opinion, it's not just about the internet has undercut them and they have to resort to crappy clickbait titles because to stay relevant. It's the fact that they are just ideologues now. All mainstream media seems to be run by ideologues. I mean, why did Fox News get rid of Tucker Carlson?
Right.
He was obviously the number one show in all.
Right.
Right, exactly. So it was just because he was talking about Ukraine in a more objective way.
Right.
So who's making that shot? So is it just? I think that's just proof that the deep state, the administrative bureaucracy of the United States, the foreign policy bureaucracy, controls the media. I think that's fair to say now. There's no.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean,
well,
do you
I think
agree?
there's really, it's a seamless garment. I mean, it's just like the thing is they're basically the same people. They're people that had graduated from the same colleges. Some of them went into these media organizations. Some of them went into government, but they're basically the same people. And the friendships and family relations and whatever are just across the line. There's really no line to speak of. There's really no.
It's the revolving door.
Yeah, and so they look at the world with the same mind. So it doesn't really. It's not really necessary for the deep state to issue instructions. They all think the same way.
Okay, well, hopefully they lose power as more and more people realize that it's just this is just narrative,
Right.
mind control,
Right.
propaganda.
Now, well, another thing that I wanted to point out too is that these newspapers and TV networks, they have also become captured in a way by their own audiences. That's the other part of it, is that they okay, yeah, they're all part of the establishment, but then the people that watch them are also part of that establishment. They have the same mind and they expect to get a certain kind of news. And when actually, like the New York Times, you're saying, well, they should start speaking the truth. I think in the long run, it would be to their advantage. But in the short run, they're going to lose a lot of readers. That's what's happened. Like recently, what was it? The Washington Post chose not to endorse a Democratic candidate. And they immediately lost 800,000 subscribers, which just seems to me bizarre. I mean, it's not even anything about like the veracity or the objectivity of your of the news that you provide. Just that your failure to go out and advocate for a candidate means that I'm not going to read your paper anymore. But 800,000 did that, so it shows like that's kind of what they've really kind of painted themselves, well, not exactly painted themselves into a corner, but they got themselves into a real fix. They have become ideological, and now they're really tied to that ideology in a lot of different ways, not just to the establishment, the government above them, but also to their own readers and and viewers.
Yeah, that's a very good point, that they have become captured by their own audience. They need to keep on feeding them. It's a dangerous situation, I think, for society, but that's become polarized, that there's so many people that need to be fed this story, this narrative. Even it's a false story, false narrative, but they have built their identity on it for so long that they need that lifeblood of Russia, terrible, bad. We need to keep on hearing that, Trump is Hitler. If they stop being fed that, they'll feel like their whole identity, they have an identity crisis. They start to break down. Yeah. But it has to, right? I mean, will people stay in that mindset forever? I mean, how do you break
obviously
people
not
out of it?
Not forever, but they could stay there for a long time. I think actually Matt Taibbi has written some very interesting articles on this polarization within the media. And the point he makes is that, again, back when I was a kid and there were just these few major news sources, each of these media outlets, their main incentive was actually try to capture as much of the general audience as possible. So you're trying to get the broad center. So there was some pretty powerful incentives not to become too biased in one direction or another. Now, I think there's no question that there was a liberal bias. I mean, it's slightly to the left, but it wasn't radically to the left. And they did journalistic ethics require them to present the other side, and they didn't always do that fairly, especially on certain issues. But in general, there was that tendency. And so you had all kinds of people sitting down and watching the news. Like my grandfather, on my mother's side, he was a conservative Republican, but he would sit down and he would watch, the national news every night. And sometimes he would criticize what he perceived to be liberal bias. But then my parents, who were, Berkeley liberals, they sit down and they watch the same news. And so everybody was getting it from the same source. And it was generally, there's no such thing as true objectivity. And I think there really was a liberal bias, but it was much more objective. And I think it was much closer to reality than what we have now. But now we have these ideological bubbles, and it's just like they've broken apart. So it's just like, MSNBC, they know who their audience is. And if they deviate from it, they get in trouble, so they have to stay very firmly in the woke progressive camp. And then Fox News, again, it's establishment conservative is what it is. Obviously they actually, we had somebody there, Tucker Carlson, that was going to go farther. So there are limits to what these mainstreams will do. I think all of them are constrained to some extent. Clearly, Fox News too, by the establishment. But they do not go, to the broad center the way that they used to. They certainly do not do that.